Hafeez. I am CUFI's Middle East analyst. Apologies for the slight delay. We underwent possibly the shortest power cut in human history, but it led to my Wi-Fi router being reset, which none of you care about, but I'm sharing anyway. So welcome to the CUFI virtual experience. I'm going to be talking about incitement today, particularly that in the Palestinian territories and the impact that is having, and how that is detrimental to peace efforts in the Middle East, and just the nature of how immoral that is. So just give me 1 second. I'm just going to pull up a presentation I have. Okay, so the title of my presentation, Incitement, Indoctrinating Palestinian Society to Hate. So the first thing I want to look at is the definition of incitement. What does it actually mean? And the Oxford Dictionary defines it as the act of, technical issues here, promoting unlawful behavior or urging someone to behave unlawfully. So that is how incitement is defined. And what does incitement do? Because look, we hear the word incitement to hatred and all these things, but what are the practical impact it has? What does this actually do, rather than just, a term that we throw out? So incitement, at its core, it delegitimizes. And what I mean by that is, in this context, it delegitimizes Israel's right to exist. It creates a system, it creates a strain of thought which ingrains itself into people, which creates the idea that Israel has no legitimate right to exist. It delegitimizes the legitimate right of a sovereign state to exist. And when you do that, it then opens the door for people to view that state or that group or whoever as illegitimate. And once you view a group or a state or a people or whatever in that lens, you can then justify things that you wouldn't normally justify. You can justify hatred, terror, violence, all these things. Dehumanizes, it links very much into the delegitimizing. Once you delegitimize somebody, you can dehumanize them because they are not legitimate. You don't view them as humans anymore. And you'll see through some of the imagery I'll share how this happens. It glorifies violence because you are fighting against something which is illegitimate. Violence is glorified. It's the right and moral thing to do. The idea that terrorism, killing innocent women and children, is a glorious action is ingrained within this. It creates a sense of hopelessness. Now, this is really important because this spans wider beyond just the Israel-Palestinian context. When you have a group and you can instill in them through education, through indoctrination, a sense of hopelessness, they are then much more willing to embrace extreme and radical ideas. They're much more willing to do things that would seem crazy, I guess, blowing themselves up, committing acts of terror, committing acts of violence on innocent people. Because there is this sense of hopelessness that there is no way out, they see these extreme acts as a way out. And lastly, I think one of the more important things on a human level, it robs Palestinian children of their childhood in this context. Because look, no child is born to hate. No child grows up and is born with this idea that I hate these people, they are evil. And look, you hear these statements or phrases people throw out, which are really ignorant, like, they come out of their mother's womb with this hatred. No, that's ignorant. That's just absurd. It really is. It's completely absurd. But what happens is people in their environments, what is being spoken into their environment, into their lives, that is what impacts and creates who they are as adults. And when you're a child in Gaza or the Palestinian territories in Ramallah, and you're constantly being told that you can't be a doctor or a nurse or a teacher, you need to go kill the Jews or you need to kill Israelis, it's completely robbing them of their childhood. Kids should not be running around dressed as suicide bombers. It's sad, it's sick, and it's just morally abhorrent. So let's have a look at some excerpts, because here's the thing. I don't want to make these claims without showing you evidence, and I don't want the evidence to be my opinion. So I've got images from actual Palestinian textbooks. These are textbooks which are being used right now. And some of these are textbooks which, when the European Union and other funders of the Palestinian Authority highlighted that these texts are an issue, that they are promoting hatred, these were the new textbooks. These were meant to not be promoting hatred, but this is still what's being used. As you can see here, this is from a physics book. This is a physics textbook, which is using terms such as, spare me 1 second. Palestinians use slingshots to confront the soldiers of the Zionist occupations. Terms like treacherous bullets, and you've got this, this caricature of the Israeli soldiers and a Palestinian child with a slingshot. And then the question's added: what is the relationship between the elongation of the slingshot's rubber and the tensile strength affecting it? So you have essentially, violence is being used to teach physics. And it seems absurd, but this is what is being given to grade 7 children. So if you imagine you're in grade 7, this is how you're being, how you're being taught physics. It's creating a narrative in your brain about how you view your neighbor. Terms like confront, the Zionist occupation, treacherous bullet. And look, this isn't the first time in history it's been done, but this is happening right now, and it's just a tragedy on so many levels. Now, if you look at the next image, this looks like anything from a biology textbook. You have the spine, you have the brain, you have the text in Arabic. This is something that you would assume to find in any textbook anywhere about biology. But when we look at what it actually says, again, it brings up this disturbing pattern of education not being used to educate and move a society forward, but rather promote very nefarious ideas and promote violence. Here is what the actual text says. Ali was absent from school as a result of an injury to his spine, which led to his paralysis. He played with a suspicious object, one of the remnants of the Zionist aggression on Gaza. His colleagues decided to visit him to check on his health. Answer the following questions. And this is from a biology textbook. Which parts of Ali were damaged and why? What is the spine? Why is it important? What is the significance of the spinal cord to the body? What are the likely effects of spinal cord damage on the body? What is the impact of the Zionist aggression on both environment and health? What safety precautions should be observed when seeing a suspicious object, etc., etc. This is from a grade 8 textbook. Again, it's using biology, but again, it's tying in this idea of Zionist aggression, the evil Zionists, and using it to teach, a very regular subject. This is from an Islamic education textbook for grade 5. And the discussion topic is the repeated Jewish attempts to kill the Prophet. By that, they mean the Prophet in Islam, Muhammad. Now, just that phrase alone to somebody in grade 5 is incredibly poisonous and corrosive. This isn't about Israel. It's not about the Zionists. It is literally blaming the Jews for repeated attempts to kill Muhammad. And if you're a Muslim, especially when you're a child and you're brought up in a Muslim background, Muhammad is sacred. He's seen as the final prophet in Islam. He is a venerated and sacred character. And here you're tying him and going, there were repeated attempts by the Jews to kill him. Let's discuss that. And then if you look at the other things in the textbooks, like biology, where you're constantly talking about the evil Zionists, the Jews on your borders, it's linking all these things into this nuclearized hatred as these people grow older and into young adults. And it just doesn't stop there. It's not just about Israel and the Jews, and that's what's really disturbing. I mean, that's disturbing enough. But the level of bigotry which has infected the education system goes beyond Israel and the Jewish people. Here is one from a textbook about history, and the image is from September 11th, the Two Towers, the attacks on the United States. Now, of course, that was a historical day because it was one of the biggest tragedies to ever hit American soil, and also it was significant. So to find that in a history textbook shouldn't be surprising. What is surprising is the questions and the text that accompany it. We will describe what we see in the picture. How did the events represented in the picture influence world politics? And now this is the troubling part. How did the USA take advantage of the 9/11 events to impose its hegemony on international politics? So there's no recognition of the thousands of innocent people who died of all faiths and backgrounds. There's no comment on the innocent Americans whose families were torn apart forever. The attacks on people just going to work, people just doing their everyday normal tasks. And here it instead talks about the USA taking advantage of the 9/11 attacks. Again, you're creating this environment where hatred, where animosity, where out and out bigotry, and a pathway which will take you toward the more extreme elements of your society become very easy. And here's another, this is from another history book, and this really, for me, encapsulates one of the biggest problems within Palestinian society. And I mentioned why incitement is so important, just to take a minute away from the slide. Why incitement is so important is no matter what happens in the future between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the most beautiful peace treaty could be signed, one which satisfies both sides, where both sides are happy, where both sides feel that they have been vindicated, and it's comprehensive. That document can be signed by the leadership on both sides. If that day comes, the seeds of this hatred which are being sown in the minds of children in the Palestinian territories aren't just going to stop. You don't teach your children hatred for generation after generation, demonize your Israeli and Jewish neighbors, demonize them in the worst possible ways, and glorify murderers, and then sign a piece of paper and this goes away. This is not creating an environment for peace. It's not putting down the groundwork of a future where this is possible. And this slide is important because I think this really personifies the real problem that we have. So there's a picture of Dalal Mughrabi, and the text from the textbook says, our Palestinian history is brimming with names of martyrs who have given their lives to the homeland, including the martyr Dalal al-Mughrabi. Her struggle portrays challenge and heroism, making her memory immortal in our hearts and minds. The text in our hands speaks about one side of her struggle. Who was this hero that they talk about? She murdered 37 innocent Israelis, including 13 children. This is the problem. When you are making these people your hero, when you're making the people who murder innocent children, innocent men, women, the heroes for the next generation, for people in grade 11, you are giving yourself a poisonous legacy for the future. This is not a person anyone should be emulating. This is not a person anybody should be looking to as a hero. She is a terrorist. She is a murderer. She is not a hero. But they have parades to celebrate her within the Palestinian Authority territories. And the Palestinian Authority, just to give you context, the Palestinian Authority are the so-called moderates in all of this. The Palestinian Authority is who, for decades, the international community has been pushing Israel to speak to make concessions, to make peace. And here they are having parades celebrating Dalal Maghrabi. They have schools named after her. And this one's interesting. So a school that was funded by the government of Belgium was named after Dalal Maghrabi. The government in Belgium found out, I think, after some great work by Palestinian Media Watch, and they weren't happy with it, understandably so. So the Palestinian Authority decided to change the name of the school because they needed the money and they didn't want to give back the millions of dollars that they'd taken from the Belgian government. But what they did instead was name a kindergarten after Dalal Maghrabi. So instead of relenting, you're right, we shouldn't be naming educational institutions after people who murder women and children. Instead, they just changed the plaque on this school that Belgium funded and found another kindergarten and named that after her. And this then ties into the normalization of violence. When you glorify terrorists, and look, people get into this debate, or critics will say, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, etc., etc. That's complete rubbish in this context. Dalal Maghrabi is not a freedom fighter. She's a terrorist. A person who kills innocent men, women, and children is a terrorist. A person who the very creed and what they believe is that they need to murder every single last Jew is a terrorist. They're not a freedom fighter. They're a criminal. They're a terrorist. They're a murderer. It's as simple as that. There is no semantic arguments having to be made here. But when you glorify terrorists, you then glorify terror. You normalize violence. And here's another page from a textbook. The Stones Uprising and Elastic Potential Energy. Once again, science is being taught through violence. And it talks about confronting bullets and fighting the occupation, and the Palestinians had no other means of defending themselves. And then it asks questions about how do slingshots help the work? What is the usefulness of shooting stones? How does it work? Examining the forms of energy, etc., etc. And this is for grade 8 children. When you're grade 8, these are the kind of images that you're finding in your textbooks. We're not even talking about what happens at Hamas summer camps, or the Palestinian Authority Television, which has all sorts of awful programming which promotes violence. This is what happens when you're in school. And look, during the whole situation here with the schools closing for COVID and all these things, there have been people who I've seen different charities do campaigns where they go, school for some children is their only safe place. This is what Palestinian children are being taught at school. A place which is meant to be a safe place is instead an incubator for hatred and terror. Another aspect of the delegitimization is erasing Israel's very right to exist. Here is a map that is in Palestinian textbooks, in Palestinian government offices, in Palestinian schools, on the logo of Palestinian kindergartens, which completely erases Israel. In that map, there is no Israel. There is just one state. There is no Gaza. There are no Palestinian territories. They count it all as Palestinian territory. Once again, no matter what document is signed, if this is what you're growing up with, if this is your idea of this is mine and it's being it's been stolen by the Jews, why are you going to make peace with anybody? Why are you going to, if a document is signed tomorrow, go, well, all is good and it's fine? The people behind this, the Palestinian leadership, who is ultimately to blame. You can't hold a Palestinian child responsible for what they're being taught or what they're being exposed to. This is the Palestinian leadership who have had billions of dollars of funding from Western governments. This is what they're teaching their children. Why? It keeps them in power. It allows them to mismanage and deny their people rights when you continually blame all your problems on someone else. And it creates an endless stream of recruits for the various militant, extremist, and terrorist organizations within the Palestinian territories. And as I mentioned earlier, these are clips from Palestinian television. You have girls saying, our enemy Zion is Satan with a tail. The host says this young girl, these are young children, Allah willing, when you grow up, and she says, so that I can shoot Jews. Child, I'm ready to stab a Jew. Tomorrow we will take our vengeance and their leader will be carried in a coffin. And these are images from Palestinian summer camps. They're not learning to bake s'mores. They're reenacting kidnappings of Israelis or dressing up as suicide bombers. Like, this is completely unacceptable. This is not okay. Yet the Palestinian leadership, year on year on year, are allowed to get away with this. On both sides, both Hamas, who are a terrorist organization, and Fatah, who the Palestinian Authority, who, again, we're constantly told are the moderates in all of this. These are from, most of these are from their television shows. This is hugely problematic. It's morally wrong. This is child abuse. Nobody can tell me that that child, who I think is 6 or 7 years old, knows what she's even saying. She didn't come to a conclusion that I want to shoot the Jews. That child didn't come to the conclusion Zion is Satan with a tail. It's being taught. This hatred is being taught, and it's being ingrained, and it's poisoning generation after generation. Instead of moving their society to a better, healthier, more productive place, it's making it more violent, more full of hate, and more poisonous and corrosive for everybody, for the neighborhood, and for their own society itself. Social media has become the latest component of this hatred. Here you have just a few graphic cartoons of things that have been on social media. Some of these have been posted from official Palestinian Authority pages, some by employees of the Palestinian Authority. But, you know, again, it fluctuates between gruesome things of murder and terror, supporting terror. When you had the stabbings and the car rammings, you know, there were cartoons glorifying them, old anti-Semitic tropes of the Jews trying to, you know, destroy the Dome of the Rock, others celebrating the shooting of Israeli soldiers. It's there are nobody is looking at these pictures and unaffected. These are having a real impact on people's lives. These are filling Palestinian children and youths and society with hatred and resentment, and that is manifesting itself in violence, which is killing actual Israelis, or just anybody that they can get close to, like Taylor Force, the American West Point graduate who was murdered in Tel Aviv when he was stabbed by a Palestinian terrorist. And this is the power of social media. Social media incitement is so dangerous because we look at an image, we read something, we don't fact check it, we just take it as being truth, and then we share it and it spreads. And before you even know it, that has now become the truth. And we're seeing that today with COVID-19, conspiracy theories that it's the Jews behind it. That then turns into an anti-Semitic act eventually. Somewhere down the line, somebody will take that and commit an act of violence or graffiti or whatever. And we've seen that happen too. what can you do? Ultimately, I've raised a lot of points here which are difficult and are unpleasant, but I don't want to just leave you with the this is a problem, oh well. There are a number of things you can do. Raise awareness, talk to friends, talk to people. There are so many people who claim to care about the situation in the Middle East who have no idea that this is happening. And this is a vital component to it. You can't look at the Middle East and talk about the future and the way forward without confronting this. We've got to call out the hypocrisy on this. You have those who say that they, like I said before, care about the Middle East, care about the situation, and we care about Palestinian human rights, but say nothing about this child abuse. They remain completely silent. They almost act like it's not happening. If you care about Palestinians, if you care about Palestinian children, you want this to end because this is corrosive, this is poisonous, this is dangerous. Palestinian children deserve better, period. No child anywhere should be subjected to this. We should stop aid that is being used to produce this hate education. In the United States, a lot has been done and a lot of aid has been cut while the Palestinian Authority continue to promote such materials or pay salaries to suicide bombers. But always look out if there is something happening, be aware, be involved. And CUFI does have action alerts when these sort of things happen. Look, ultimately, there is no silver bullet. We can't just wish this away. We can't just go, we don't want this to happen, it will stop. But we have a responsibility. Now that you know, we have a responsibility to find out more and raise the issue. And ultimately, we have to be better. Fighting hatred with hatred, it's not, I mean, it's just silly. We must be better. Our values have to be better. When we now look at this and go, well, all those Palestinians are the same, all those Arabs are violent, how is that helping? How is that Christ-like? Genuinely, it's not. It may feel good, it may be a reflection of your frustration, but we're not called to basically act on our frustrations and our emotions in that moment. We have to be better. We have to lead with love and work for justice. And that is so important. Don't generalize, don't become a reflection of the hatred that is being taught, and then don't let that be reflected in you, because that is just not good for the heart or the soul. And look, why I feel so passionate about incitement and why we have to speak up against it. Look, I grew up in the UK, yet it was the same sort of propaganda that I got from other sources, which made me anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and anti-Western at one part of my life. I'm not now. I work for Christians United for Israel, but just to give you context. And hatred is poisonous and corrosive, so please don't let the hatred of our enemies, of those who don't care about human rights, those who brainwash innocent children to hate, don't let their hatred poison you. Because look, when we work for what is right, when we speak out for what is just, there is always hope. There is always hope in the future. And I end with this image, which is from a soccer game between Palestinian and Israeli children. It's possible. It's not easy. It's not going to be overnight, but a shared future with respect, where cooperation and where the hatred no longer exists are possible. But it has to start by making sure that hatred isn't part of a curriculum and an education system in the Palestinian territory. That has to be key, because education and truth are so important. That's really the building block for a foundation of peace and justice. Okay, and that's essentially the end of my presentation. So it's just the neighbor's dog. Um, that's the end of my presentation. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please send them in and I will get back to you. And thankfully, there is a window between me and that very loud dog outside. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. God bless.